Today, we have got a two-in-one player review. We're doing a player from the start of the season and a player from the end of the season. We're talking all about Justin Danforth and Lane Pederson in today's Locked On Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to bring you news, stories, the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and also over on YouTube. So if you're an everydayer, you know this. If this is your first time, welcome on in. Hit subscribe, hit like, leave a review, leave a comment, whatever you feel like you want to do. I appreciate any and all interactions. I also want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. So let's talk player reviews. Initially, my plan for the player reviews was to do one player per episode. And then I looked at how few players played over like 20 games this season. So what we're going to do instead is some players are going to kind of get paired up as and when I need them to. So today we're going to do the first half of the episode is going to be about Justin Danforth, who was here for like 11 games at the start of the season. And then the second half is going to be Lane Pederson, who was here kind of halfway-ish through the season, I think. He was a waiver pickup. And so that's how we're going to do today. One from the start of the season, one from the end of the season. And we'll start with Justin Danforth, who I thought had a pretty good, feels weird to say rookie season because, you know, he's 30 years old. But yes, last season, 45 games, 14 points. This season, he played 6 games before getting injured, had 3 points in those games, 2 goals and an assist. So was that going to come down to earth? Was he going to be a 40-point player? Maybe. But unfortunately, he was, I believe, the first separated shoulder injury of the season, which the first of like 4, I think, 4 or 5. There's a lot of separated shoulders this season. It worries me a little bit, but he had a really good start. He was looking good. He was one of those players that came up last season when they had a bunch of injuries near the end of the season and played really well and had a really good training camp and kind of played his way into a spot this season. He'd spent his entire career in the minors before this. I believe this was only his second season in the Blue Jackets organization. He was with the Bridgeport Sound Tigers, then the Rochester Americans, spent a minute in the ECHL with the Cincinnati Cyclones, and then went over to Finland. Spent the 2021 season in the KHL, I assume because of COVID, etc. And then came back over to the NHL, where he joined the Blue Jackets and the Monsters. Started off with the Monsters, got called up to the Blue Jackets when people got injured. And like I said, I think he did pretty well. It's always fun to score your first NHL goal, especially at the age of like 29. But in terms of this season specifically, again, like I said, he was having a really hot start. He's one of those players, I feel like, that when they talk about like energy players, that's him. You know, he wants to stay in the lineup, so he tries real hard every single shift. In the same way that like you don't really see Kirill Marchenko take a shift off, and I think because he's worried about losing his spot, consciously or not, you know. And I think Justin Danforth is the same, but I think he's probably a little bit more justified with the worry. You know, he's definitely a depth guy. He's definitely a bottom 6 guy, but he's a guy that I really liked last season. And this season, again, I really liked. He, like I said, 6 games, small sample size, but he had a 54% Corsi 4 percentage, 2 goals in those 6 games, So if he had turned around and been like a goal every 3 games, like that would have been incredible. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. And it's always tough to look at these, small sample sizes of players that get injured right at the start of the season because like Zach Werenski is another one. Justin Danforth was not in my healthy CPJ math. He is my 14th forward at the minute, I think. You could probably swap him in and out. Like I would trade Olivier out for him in a heartbeat, but I decided to go with what I thought the Blue Jackets would do, and that's keep Olivier around. But he's a player that you need. You can't have 4 lines of stars. You need a guy like Justin Danforth who is not making a ton of money, who is not playing a ton of minutes, and who, he gets maybe, I don't know, 10 shifts a game. He's playing, let's see, where is game numbers? So he played, 12 minutes, 13 minutes, 20 minutes, and 16 minutes. So, average that probably averages out at like 13 minutes. Like that's fine. I'm okay with that. You need guys like that. He is on injured reserve. He has a contract next year, 975K, which is the perfect amount, and then he's a UFA after that. So super happy with just a Danforth. As a I'm looking at his body of work as a Blue Jacket, not necessarily just this season, because like 6 games is such a small sample size, but it feels like a good depth player to have. He's not waivers eligible anymore, because he is too old. I don't know that he's played the requisite number of games yet, so maybe he is still waivers eligible, but I don't think so. I should really have looked that up before starting this episode, but it's fine. In a minute, we are going to talk about Lane Pederson, who is the other player that we're looking at today. So that's coming up in just a second on Locked On Blue Jackets, your team every day. But first, I've got to tell you all about Gametime, because I am terrible at planning things. Okay. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and I'm like, hey, I'm going to go do something today. If I'm traveling, or, if my partner is working and I'm like, well, I've got time to kill or whatever. Sometimes I'll be like, well, I'll go to a show. I'll go to a game. I'll do something. I get really stressed out trying to buy tickets, though. It's a really hard, it's a really bad combination of things, but Gametime makes it much easier. They've got deals on last-minute tickets. They've got a guarantee for if you find tickets in the same section and broke for less, they'll credit you 110% of the difference. They've got flash deals, last-minute tickets, images of seat view, so you can see that your view isn't going to be obstructed, or if you're going to be able to see or whatever. Event cancellation protection, job loss protection. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Snag the tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Let's talk about Lane Pederson, who was a waiver pickup from Vancouver, I believe. He played in a game. So the Blue Jackets were in Vancouver. He played in that game and then got put on waivers basically immediately afterwards, and the Blue Jackets claimed him, which I do think was a very funny turn of events, because I guess they saw something that they liked. He would finish the season with the Blue Jackets 3 points in 16 games, which is way fewer games than I thought he played, if I'm being honest. One of those. Okay, here's the thing about Lane Pederson. I feel like he's just a Danforth, but younger. So he's on his 4th NHL season and his 4th NHL team. He's played fewer than his season high for games is 29, excuse me. His career high for points is 3. He's got 11 career points in 71 games so far. I will say his face-off percentage is pretty good, 57.2. which on the Blue Jackets is not nothing, you know? He is a center. He is still young. He is, I believe, a UFA at the end of this season. I closed cap friendly, and that was a mistake. So who knows whether he will be around next season? Yes, he's a UFA only because he didn't play enough NHL games by the age of 25. So he is a UFA Group 6, which means he could walk this offseason. I would expect him to. I'm not expecting to see him back. I'm just going to turn off the game time overlay because that's been there for the past 3 minutes. Just a really weird case study of a player. There were a lot of waiver pickups this season that guys who either made it through waivers or were claimed when they shouldn't even have been on waivers in the first place. Lane Pederson was a confusing pickup. I don't think he was great for the team, but what he did do was give them a body. In terms of ice time, he didn't get a ton. His last game, he played 8 minutes. His season high, I believe, was 18. But yeah, he mostly kind of hovered around that Justin Danforth, like 12 and a half minute, 13 minutes a game, which is fine. The problem is, and I feel like I've all of the things I like about Justin Danforth are the things I dislike about Lane Pederson, but that's not quite what I mean. You can't have a full team of Pedersons and Danforths. Like that's not how it works. And if you have to pick one, like I would go with Danforth every day. I think he has more energy. I think he has more to prove. I don't ever think he's going to be a star in this league, but I think he offers a little bit more than Pederson did. They have the same amount of points, and Pederson played 10 games more than the Blue Jacket than Danforth. You know, he did. Oh, his career high, excuse me. I said his career high was 3 points. That's a lie. His career high is actually 6 points, which he had this season. And he played 27 games in total, 11 for Vancouver, 16 for the Blue Jackets. So not like an overwhelming success, I don't think. This feels like a guy that is probably going to be pretty good on an AHL team somewhere, but I mean, not necessarily. He played 18 games for Abbotsford this season, had 24 points. So, you know, that feels about the level that he's at. I would take him on the Monsters. I absolutely would take him on the Monsters. I don't think he should be on the Blue Jackets next season. They don't have room for him. They have a bunch of players that are kind of his like archetype, so to speak, in Robinson, in Danforth, you know, like those bottom 6 guys that. And this is not to say that Lane Pederson doesn't try. I just feel like he doesn't bring as much energy as guys like Foodie as well. I think Liam Foodie brought a lot of energy this season. I finally got rewarded with his first NHL game. You know, we're going to talk about Foodie in tomorrow's episode, probably. But it's, I don't know, it's a weird one. In terms of grade, I didn't give Justin Danforth a grade. It feels weird to give a grade for 6 or 16 NHL games. So I'm going to give them both an incomplete, I think, which might be cheating. But my conclusion is thus: yes to Justin Danforth being back. I don't even necessarily think he needs to be on the team, but it would be good to have him as that 13th or 14th forward that pushes guys to stay in the lineup and is there in case of injury. Lane Pederson, I would not like to see him back. That's no shade on Pederson. I just don't think there's room for him on the team, and I think there are other players that are under contract for the Blue Jackets that do what he does, but better. In a minute, we are going to finish up with just a quick check-in with the CHL. Yesterday, I recorded an episode about the CHL playoffs, but I recorded it on Monday. It aired Tuesday morning about the Moose Jaw Winnipeg series that was 3-2 to Winnipeg. So we're going to talk about that game in just a second. Here at Locked On Blue Jackets, your team every day. Okay, let's talk about the WHL just for a second, because Denton Mateychuk and Martin Rysavy's season is over. Winnipeg won 4-2 in the series. They won that final game 8-2 in total, which, like, one of those teams came to play, and it was the team that had Connor McLennan on it because he had 2 goals, including the game winner. Denton Mateychuk scored his 3rd of the game. Martin Rysavy not on the score sheet, but Rysavy does finish with a surprising season. I believe he had 10 points in 10 games this season. Let me just double check that. 10 points in 10 games this season for a 7th round pick. Incredible. I would be willing to bet that at some point soon he is going to be signing that entry-level contract. Like I said, he's 20 now. He's too old to return to the WHL, so like tough to see his WHL career end that way. But I think he finished it playing as well as he possibly could. Denton Mateychuk, I assume, will be back with Moose Jaw next season. He doesn't turn 19 until July. He's a very young member of draft. 8 points in 10 playoff games, which for a defenseman, pretty good. Not quite as good as the regular season. He didn't ever really get a chance to kind of get going, I don't think. But I'm fully expecting to see him back with Moose Jaw next season. But I am excited to see him in training camp, in rookie camp, and in the preseason for the Blue Jackets. So the Blue Jackets are down to 3 players left in the playoffs. They've got Luca Del Belbaluz in the OHL. They've got James Malatesta and Jordan DeMay in the QMJHL. All 3 of those series start not tonight, I don't think, but they start the OHL. The Sarnia Sting series start on Friday. And the QMJHL series, or 2 series, because they are not playing each other yet, but I would imagine that is what is going to be pretty soon. We talked about that yesterday. We don't have to rehash that all. Quebec series with James Malatesta starts on Friday, and Halifax starts on Saturday. So we've got a minute until the next round starts, but those 3 players, very excited to see what comes next. We'll do another CHL recap, checking in next week, and hopefully we'll have more good news to talk to about you guys for those 3 players. But that's kind of all I've got for today. Tomorrow, we are going to be doing a season review of Liam Foodie, I believe, is the next person on the list. I don't have my list in front of me, but we'll be doing another season player review. There'll be a Twitter poll going up for that at some point. I've been Jay Foster. You can find me on Twitter at _Jacob Foster, JAKOB FORSTER. You can find the podcast at LO_Blue Jacket. If you have comments, questions, criticisms, you can email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. And thank you for listening. Thank you for making this your first listen of the day every day. Locked on Blue Jacket is free and available. We're on all podcast platforms. We're over on YouTube. We are your team every day. So enjoy this episode. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. And until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.